Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Axiom discs Insanity. So let's go ahead, kick things off by taking a look at the profile of the Insanity. Now it does have a very slender profile in this Neutron plastic, and also compared to the other plastic types, they also do have very slender feels. In this Neutron though, it does have a little bit of a dome, some a little bit more dome like the Fission, just very so slightly, but then the Eclipse is like just absolutely bored flat, practically near puddle topped. And I love that there's a little bit of variety because players have different preferences. Some players like slightly domey discs, others like flatter discs. So I love seeing that variety so that way you can find what works best for you. By the way, everyone, if you want to try the Insanity for yourself, be sure to visit greatleaguesdisc.com. Use that promo code Lefty to save yourself 10%. Let's get back to the video. Now let's get into the flight, first taking a look at the flight numbers. The Insanity has a speed of 9, glide 5, turn -2, and a fade of 1.5. But the most important part, how is it actually going to fly for you? Well, I have a medium to slower arm speed, and for myself, when I throw it on an exaggerated hyzer, that's exactly what it does. Now, it maybe gets a little bit of flip up, but it still holds that arcing hyzer line all the way to the ground. But then when I throw it on a slight hyzer, not so exaggerated, that's when I get it to flip up to flat, ride pretty straight until about the final quarter of the flight before it has a little bit of a hyzer finish. And then when thrown flat, that's when you really start noticing that in that mid-flight, you're going to get a good amount of turn. It still has enough late stability that it'll try to check up and try to fight out of that turn, but it doesn't really have a lot of late stability, so if you do get it too much on angle, it's not going to autocorrect. But once you find the correct release angle for your arm speed, oh boy, you are in for a treat, as this is a bombing fairway driver. It has absolutely incredible amounts of glide, paired with the understability in the mid-flight, and then just again, sneaky amounts, just enough to kind of level itself out, fade at the very end. This is a max distance fairway driver that for players with those slower medium arms, this may be one of the furthest flying discs in your bag because it's so easy to hyzer flip and absolute effortless S-curving shots. It really is like a distance cheat code for players with slower to medium arms. And being in that speed 9, it is very controllable as well. So it's not like a speed 12 where the rim is so wide you almost don't really know exactly where it's going to go. Being a speed 9, it has that thinner rim, so it has a lot of great control, which makes this good not only for wide open holes, for shots like you're seeing here, but also for the woods. You can get it to work on several different angles. A lot of those kind of like, say, gaps, tunnel shots with a hyzer flip, or if you need to throw something on a slight anhyzer, let it hold around like a bend or down a fairway with a dog leg with just enough late stability where it's going to try to pan out and level itself off so you can get kind of a nice forward scoot and not too much hard of a dump. Let's go ahead, change things up from the field over to the course and see how I would use the Insanity. This hole, you have a wall of trees just in front of the basket, so you cannot go over the top, and then you have this small gap that you have to hit at the very end of the flight. I'm opting to throw that exaggerated hyzer line with the Insanity and just let it hold that arcing hyzer all the way through the gap. For this next hole, we have a pretty wooded fairway, and you have a Mando on that left-hand side, so you cannot go left, a wall of trees to the right. But once you get through this initial gap, it opens up quite a bit on the right-hand side, so I want something that's going to flex down this fairway and end up on the right-hand side, and that is something that when thrown flat, that the Insanity does very well. Maybe just a little bit too high on the throw, but the shot shape was exactly what I was looking for. For this next hole, this is dealer's choice. You can do whatever you feel comfortable with. You have so much wide open space. This is a great example of the good distance potential you can get out of the Insanity. Throw it on a slight anhyzer, let it hold, and then just towards the very end of the flight, let it check up and then hyzer back. Let's change things up and go from backhand over to forehand. This hole, it matches for a forehand shot very well. I want something that's going to go left, cut across right and then have a slight finish at the very end, and thrown with just a little bit of hyzer, that is what the Insanity does absolutely perfectly for forehand. It surprisingly does have a little bit more torque resistance than I was expecting for something that does have so much turn in the mid-flight. Now, the Insanity does not come just in neutron. It also comes in fission, proton, eclipse, plasma, and cosmic neutron, and I do have a couple of those different plastic types to compare. First up is the Eclipse, which remember is the very flat, near puddle-topped version of the Insanity. This one is pure beef. If you want a four-handing disc that's almost like a Firebird, that is what you want to be using the Eclipse for. This thing is so overstable that even when thrown on an exaggerated anhyzer line, it fights out of it almost immediately. Next for the Proton, kind of fits between the Neutron and the Eclipse. When thrown flat, it rides out really straight, almost no turn, and then a little bit of a hyzer finish at the end, which makes it really nice for forehand because it holds the torque better than Neutron and has a harder finish. I would definitely be using the Proton when it comes to almost all forehanding shots, unless I needed the real extreme beef of the Eclipse. When it comes to the Fission, it's going to be very dependent on the weight. If you get a very light one, it's going to be very flippy. This one is pretty comparable in weight to the Neutron, I think in kind of the upper 160s, and this thing mirrors it pretty well, but I think it just has a little bit more fade at the very end than the Neutron had. It also just held the torque from forehand slightly better than the Neutron. So for the lefty lines, let's go ahead and take a look at all four of these plastic types side by side. With the Neutron, starts out straight, gets a good meandering turn in that mid-flight before having that baby hyzer back. Fission matches Neutron quite a bit, straight, a little bit of turn, but then there's that kind of check up a little bit earlier and a little bit of a harder finish. Proton yanked a little bit, but it rides out incredibly straight, checks up faster than the other two, and has a harder finish. And then you have the Eclipse, which again is basically a completely different disc, that this thing wants nothing with going any kind of distance. It just wants to hyzer out almost immediately. So if you're a slow arm, I would recommend going with a very lightweight Fission or a Neutron plastic. Those tend to be probably the two more on the understable side of things. And if you're looking for an Insanity that's going to be straighter, kind of more of a slight wind fighting version that also has a very flat flight plate to it, so that way it also doubles as a good forehanding driver, I would highly recommend the Proton. Also for those bigger arms, the Proton is probably going to be flying kind of like how that Neutron and Fission was for me. And if you like the feel of the Insanity and you want something that is basically going to fly like a Firebird that you can always trust, then try to find one of the Halloween Eclipses. They're from a few years ago, but you can still find them out there. Not to mention, it is probably one of the flattest, slimmest discs that I have ever thrown. That is all I have for you guys. As always, please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button. It's one small click for you, but it means so much to the channel. Overall, the Insanity is such an impressive fairway driver. It is just so versatile. You can use it for hyzer flips. You can use it for S-curving shots. You can use it for controlled turnovers. Players of all skill levels will be able to find an Insanity that works best for their games. It is something I would highly recommend. And if you want to get the Insanity again, visit Great Lakes Disc and use that code to save yourself 10%. I appreciate it, and until the next one, keep banging chains.